Hello, everyone. Let me get started by just congratulating Nitin and the group for putting today together, and obviously not just for putting today together, but for putting Elevate together and demonstrating that you can do a different kind of investment and be successful. Nitin, are you here? All right, we'll thank him in his absence. So thrilled to have you here today. I thought we'd start by, even though there's a mini description, having people walk down and just give you a couple more sentences about themselves. So, Sayer?
Hi, I'm Sayer. I'm the Director of Mission-Related Investing for the Meyer Memorial Trust. I work at a foundation doing investments within the region. So Elevate Capital is part of our portfolio. We were advised that we would be asked about our first concert and where it was. So I'm from Eugene, so I don't have anything exciting that came to town. I probably saw the Crazy Eights and Violent Femmes when I was a little kid. So that's about how I answer that one.
Yeah, so I asked everybody, tell us your first concert, what year, what location, who'd you see?
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know if I can give you the year. My name is Tori Campbell, and I'm here on behalf of Prosper Portland, which is the economic arm of the city. And my role there is I manage our entrepreneurship and community economic development initiatives and teams throughout the city. What brings me to this platform is a lot of our work is collectively working with 16 partners who do a lot of the direct service throughout the city, serving over 700, and I think this year is around 720 businesses. Many of them are entrepreneurs of color and women. And so the goal is to continue to create a more equitable economy. It means we have to be more inclusive. And so that's how we show up in this work. First concert for me, I grew up in a pretty religious home, so my mom had us go see a group called the Winans, which is like a gospel quartet of men. And so that was our first concert growing up as a kid. This was in the Bay Area at Berkeley. And I think I might have been 10 or 11.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ganesh Anand. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a startup called RFPIO. We are based out of Beaverton. I'm here today with my colleagues Shankar and Manish. Also, we have one of our board member here, Raghu, who's sitting with my team. We are a software company who help companies to respond to RFPs, which is the request for proposals. A lot of our customers use our application to win more businesses from their prospects. So I think the reason why I'm part of this panel is probably I'm a person of color. So also to talk about the concert, I think I have the benefit of saying whatever I want because I was not here, so you guys don't know what concert I went there. So it's not a traditional concert where I was grown up in, I grew up in India, so I think my parents took me to, local, we call it as an orchestra. We don't call it concert, it is an orchestra. So it happens all over, every function, every festival, it happens on the road. It's not like a stadium or like this thing. I remember it was even starting when I was 3 or 4 year old, being part of those music festivals. So that's all I can tell.
Hello, I'm Steve Marsh. I'm chairman and founder of a software company here in town called Smarsh. And more recently, and I think the reason I'm up here is I've founded an organization called Archivist Capital, which is invested in Elevate and also invests alongside Elevate in many of the companies who are up here today. So I think my first concert was when I was 5 years old. I went to see Kenny Rogers in Rochester, New York. And it's actually a funny story. My mother got really, really upset with Kenny Rogers because she had dragged me from the upper decks down to the stage and tried to get him to acknowledge me and shake my hand or give me an autograph or something, and he just blew straight by. Forever since then, my mother is not a big fan of Kenny Rogers. So.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Parsons. I'm the CEO of Palo Alto Software, and I'm here. Palo Alto Software is an investor in the Elevate Fund. Palo Alto Software has a mission to help people succeed in business, and we do that with online tools and content to help entrepreneurs do better financial forecasting and strategic planning and financial management. I'm also on the board of the Oregon Growth Board and the Oregon Community Foundation. So just all of the topics here, inclusion is a really big passion that I have. Besides being a woman CEO of a tech company, I'm also a Latina, so I'm just really thrilled to be supporting, discussing, and really talking about inclusion, because if you're not purposeful, it doesn't happen. So I'm really happy to be here. My first concert, I don't know if I remember when I was a little kid, but the first concert that I went to, driving my friends after I'd gotten my license, was in Shoreline, Mountain View, California, and I went to REM.
Well, in the interest of full transparency, my first concert when I was 13 in Hartford, Connecticut was Jimi Hendrix. But that dates me. To some extent, this panel, and you could even argue the entire day, is kind of the Ganesh show, because everybody on this stage, with the exception of me, either invested through Elevate, or I know in the case of Steve on his own, in RFPIO and got this huge return. Nobody's telling me how much. Maybe you'll tell us on the stage. And Ganesh is the shiny, bright thing who everyone's pointing to, is saying, here's an example of how you can do good and do well at the same time. So it seems fitting for you to tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you became an entrepreneur, and the degree to which you faced challenges because of the color of your skin. We talked a little bit about this last night.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It would be unfair if I take all the credit to myself. Actually, it was the team that we had put together. Even one thing, if you ask me, what I'm so proud of is the team that we have. We've been 3 years. I'll talk about the business, what we do, but since you gave the credit of me, the shining star, I don't want to take all those things. 3 years, we have not lost one employee. We are now almost 50 who have started with us, continue to stay with us. I think that's the power of our success. That's the reason why I believe we are here today. So a lot of our thing goes to the team. We have teams in India and as well as in the Beaverton office. So that's what. So a little bit about our business. So we started back in 2015, and myself and my co-founders here, we were discussing a lot of ideas around it. If it had not been an RFPIO idea, we would have been selling leaf plates. We myself, Shankar and Sundar, were exploring, in India you get these palm tree leaves where, you can make plates out of it. So I and Shankar, remember, we walked into Whole Foods, because Whole Food is organic, and we thought they would encourage organic material. So we entered into this Whole Food, trying to sell this plate to see if we can import from India. So those guys said, no, we can't take anything out the store. You have to go to the corporate office, which is in Seattle. So that ended up there. So we don't know who to approach, and we were sitting in at a Starbucks, thinking about different ideas. So the idea came up in a way where I myself was a product manager before, and Shankar was a implementation manager, Sundar was a security expert, Manish was technology expert. We all were part of sales process. We have helped a lot of our sales team to close deals. So we've been part of that, but we've never been a seller ourselves. We help them to sell. But we were exploring all these ideas, and then we realized, okay, we had this great idea under our belly. We never thought about it. We were going around everything because we wanted to start something on our own. And that's when we realized, okay, we have this great idea. So we started exploring, things like, the reason why it kind of ticked to us is so we ourselves have responded to quite a few RFPs. So we have used, I was talking to Raghu yesterday night, we have used Salesforce to manage our process. We have used Google Docs to manage our process. It didn't work out. We changed it to Jira, which is an Atlassian product, which didn't work out, and we started using Microsoft Excel. Again, that also didn't work out. If you look today, all of them are our customers. Google uses us, Salesforce uses RFPIO, Atlassian uses RFPIO, Microsoft uses RFPIO. So it's kind of an interesting story to see how that kind of an experience even changed us. To talk about the challenges, I think I was a little unfortunate, unfortunate. I was fortunate enough to meet the right folks, I would say. In fact, the first person who invested in RFPIO is a white person. So it's just like, I think biggest challenge as a person of color I had, is especially people from Indian descent will have is people think we are engineers. You know,
we are being people from India.
India. So when even but honestly speaking, I never did engineering, nor my background is engineering. I have no idea what that coding means. You know, Raghu and Manish was talking just now because about, I just kind of stepped away because I didn't want to be in that conversation. I don't know. But what challenge I faced when I was fundraising is, you know, where they were not believing in me whether I can sell. I myself, my background is an MBA with finance and marketing, but I started my career as a salesperson, feet on street salesperson back in India, whether it's working for a stockbroker. I have to convince investors to invest through this broker. That was my job. So when I came to the States and I was working for a software company, and then quit my job and started fundraising, I think the biggest challenge I had when initially meeting all the people is, can he sell? Can he do? He's not an engineer. Can this company sell? But I have to acknowledge the first person to trust is also the person who said, okay, I'm going to put in money. When the person first gave us the money, there's no product, no customer. It was just a PowerPoint deck with a business idea. And it is true, the previous panel was talking about how the business idea may become irrelevant when you go to the market. It kind of happened to us. We kind of pivoted. We were fortunate enough to pivot at the business idea level. So the biggest challenge as a person of color I faced was not so much on the fundraising, because we really felt the pain of, okay, trusting. Trust was an important factor for us when people, and that's when I think one of the reasons why we went with, it's not a friends and family round, we went with a business contact round. So he was able to help us. And then we went to Elevate. We were fortunate enough to talk to Nitin at an event. So Nitin introduced, I think we are part of both the Capital Fund and the Inclusive Fund, which we are very grateful for that. We raised about close to $550,000 just through Elevate. And then at that round, we raised about close to $2 million at that round. And Steve was an investor in our business through that. So yeah, that's a little bit of story. And recently we did a financial rounds. We did a Series A in July of 2018, where both Nitin, Raghu, and Steve was very instrumental in that round, where we were able to, you know, get funds through another private equity firm out in the Bay Area, or not in Los Angeles. So, which helped us to kind of give exit to some of the early investors that we had. So we have, I think we've given exit to almost 11 investors who were part of my previous cap table.
So with an understanding that you may not be able to answer this question, Elevate and Steve and others invested in roughly what date?
So I think the last check I got from Steve, Steve was the last person to give us the money. I think it was March of 2017. Is that right, Steve?
It started in 2016. I think there was a
the
second
last,
round
yeah.
in
So
2017.
Then you got a big financing from, is it K1?
K1, yeah.
In what date?
July of 2018.
So 2 years.
Technically speaking, 1 year and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Less than 2 years.
Less than 2 years.
And can someone tell me what X investors were returned?
I don't want to get into the details,
Steve?
but
I'm not going to tell you. No.
I've been trying to get
Especially
this number
half a second after hearing Ganesh
all
say
day.
he doesn't want to share it.
I gather it was a substantial.
it is one of the best, I can tell you. It is probably the best, correct me, as far as Nitin told, it is the best returns that for that time value of money an investor got.
Wonderful. So, Tori, let me ask you, you work for a city agency that my guess is 20 years ago would have never given money to a VC fund, that this is relatively new. Even though you may not be the person making the decision about we're going to invest in a VC fund, let alone a VC fund that focuses on inclusion, it's a potentially controversial move for a city agency to basically be choosing winners and losers, engaging in the marketplace. You run the risk that some annoying reporter is going to call you and ask you about it. Can you talk at all about the thinking on the part of Prosper Portland? Because this is not what Prosper Portland, which was then called the PDC, would have ever done 20 years ago.
Yeah, a lot of the work stems from a real major shift that we made almost 3 years ago now with our strategic plan. So our strategic plan basically called out how we've shown up in our city historically in terms of who we have served, the businesses that we've called good, and in some ways choosing the winners and losers around our policies and our programming. And within our strategic plan, it really created and made equity a much more of a stronger emphasis. And so the natural progression when you think about how are we serving or how are we not serving then underserved entrepreneurs, innovators, and business leaders, you begin to wrestle through what are the things that they need in order to survive. Or more importantly, how are we serving a dominant culture or white-led businesses, and how do we then shift that and begin to be more equitable in how we support that? And so one of the things that comes up historically, and many of us are aware in this room, is the huge funding gap. The lack of access to meaningful capital, both early on, friends and family, seed funds, the different phases. And so for us, it was a natural progression to get to this place of, if we're going to do this, you also have to, in many ways, put your money where your mouth is. And so we are very excited about the current progress and really of the things we're starting to see. We developed the Inclusive Startup Fund in partnership with Multnomah County and Business Oregon, recognizing this is one way that we can play a particular and important role as a city agency, not so much in the volume of our dollars, but signifying in many ways the priorities that we're setting forth in terms of who then should be benefiting moving forward within our city. We just believe it's not only a moral imperative, but it's also just economically smart.
Thank you. So Steve, are you an investor in Elevate as well as on your own?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just curious, on your own you invested in Ganesh. Was it because Ganesh is a person of color and you decided you wanted to give back? You've done very well in Portland. Was it just, no, this is a great investment, I don't care what color his skin is?
And I think the latter there. No, so I invested in Elevate, obviously, believe in inclusiveness and the purpose of Elevate Capital and the Inclusive Fund, and was happy to do that. I think the decision to invest in Ganesh and RFPIO was not for any particular reason having to do with the color of his skin. The story was, for many years inside my software company, we, like many of RFPIO's clients, responded to these RFP processes in a very inefficient manner using poorly selected tools, Microsoft, Excel, email, and it was an inefficient process that kind of made me bananas as the CEO of the company. And in addition to not always putting our best foot forth in some of these RFP responses and wasting a lot of time while we did it, there was also no visibility as to how we were doing when we responded to these RFPs. So I was generally just frustrated with the process, and we kind of come to grips with that as being the reality of the circumstances. Then one day, I think in 2016, saw an article in the Portland Business Journal about RFPIO and what they were doing. Started asking around and had somebody within, I think, just a few days of that make an introduction to Ganesh. Started asking around my company, came to learn that my sales engineering and sales operations teams were starting to test the software and thought very highly of the product. So eventually just reached out and had a meeting with Ganesh. And in addition to seeing a product that was very, very well designed and very, very slick and mature looking, even for such an early stage company, and being impressed by that, I was blown away by Ganesh's desire to just listen, and would ask questions and listen and would take notes and came to every meeting incredibly prepared. And I don't think I ever told him this, but I got data points from around my office, including from the receptionist saying, well, yeah, Ganesh showed up 15, 20 minutes early, asked to get into the conference room, wanted to make sure that he was there and everything was nailed and ready to go, for the presentation. And I think it was just a reflection upon him and the team and the type of organization that they were building. So after a handful of conversations, not only did I want to make Marsh be a customer of RFPIO, but like what they were doing enough to want to invest personally.
Great. So Sabrina, from the perspective of the Oregon Growth Board and the Oregon Community Foundation, I don't know how long you've been a member of those organizations, but at some point inclusion sort of rose to the top of the heap. I'm just wondering how that's changed the dynamics of those organizations in terms of how you operate.
Yeah, Oregon Growth Board, I've been on a little less than a year. I'm in my 4th year at Oregon Community Foundation. I think Oregon Community Foundation has been very purposeful in EDI and inclusion, and over the past 10 years has, in particular the past 5 to 8 has been very purposeful about needing to think about it, talk about it. At the same time, there was definitely a lot of talking with donors and donors at Oregon Community Foundation who were interested in impact investing. And what is that, and how can OCF do impact investing, and is there a part of OCF that isn't all grant giving and can use the $2 billion that they manage and take a piece of that and be very purposeful in Oregon so that you can really address underserved communities. And that's really the angle with which OCF has really looked at that investing is, how can they better use some of this money and not just give grants and help underserved entrepreneurs also connect to the right organizations. So OCF isn't running a fund, they're investing in all kinds of different ways, both in loan programs, debt capital, angel, equity, investing in Elevate, and continues to do that. And I would say with OCF, it's probably still in its infancy, really trying to figure out what that means long term, and continues to get more and more interest from donors. They want more.
Is there a percentage of OCF's assets that have been dedicated to sort of inclusion investing, if that's what
initially a very, very, very small percentage, in the like 1% or even less than that. It's been very, very small. It's been an experiment. Let's see what we can do. Let's see how this works. Let's really dig in. OCF is very stringent on research and due diligence, and so they started by sticking their toe in the water. From that, actually, though, they've raised a fund from donors specifically for impact investing, and I believe it was a target of $20 million for that fund, and I believe they've already surpassed that. So, that tells you there's interest. People are interested, and they're interested in different ways of supporting economic development and entrepreneurship, and they don't want to just see OCF do the grant only. They want to see the money that they are putting into OCF work for them in lots of different ways.
Thank you. So Sarah, the Meyer Trust, I think it's fair to say that the Meyer Trust has been, in many respects, sort of the backbone of Elevate. Nitin told the story this morning about his encounter with Rakaya, who basically said, you need to do this. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Meyer Trust, but it is either the first or second largest foundation in the state of Oregon. Third? Oh, all right. With assets of roughly how much?
$850 million on a good day.
All right, so not today is a good day, as opposed to yesterday. I trust that most of you know that the Meyer Trust comes from the estate of Fred Grubmeyer, who then changed his name to Fred Meyer, who then built a chain of stores that after his death was sold to Kroger. No disrespect to Mr. Meyer, who I did have the chance to meet once, but my guess is he might be rolling over in his grave if he knew how the focus of the Meyer Trust had really radically shifted from the time of his death. And really, it's only been in the past 5 or 10 years that a commitment to social justice and equity and inclusion has been as central a part of your mission. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, and then your decision to participate in Elevate and what you saw in RFPO that you liked.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I guess I'll go back to Fred. We always looked at him as probably the first and foremost thing that he offered was he was an innovator. He was an entrepreneur in his own right. And if we were going to represent him with his own personal assets, because that's what ended up happening, he didn't have heirs, so all of his money from the sale of the stores all ended up in the foundation that I work for. If the foundation didn't emulate the man, meaning we weren't entrepreneurial and we weren't trying to go after opportunities in the market, and we weren't trying to innovate in a way to drive our social purpose forward, that we weren't actually being true to the founder. And so I think that that was a challenge that we took on as the staff, because generally foundations are 5% of our assets are made in grants, and that's all the exciting stuff and all the boards and the buildings, and I'm sure a portion of this building we funded. That's great, but then 95% of the assets are spent on things all over the world. They have absolutely nothing to do with our mission. So we were trying to challenge that paradigm. How do you take part of that 95% and bring it back home? And so we've done it in a lot of different ways in global investing, and we've also done a lot of that in regional investing. I think what we as Oregonians have always done well, because we're sort of anchored in between two giant population centers that have a lot more wealth than us, is collaborate and work together. And on small strategies, I mean, in terms of the US, a $10 million fund is laughable. Like, nobody wants to run a $10 million fund. I have people from JP Morgan Chase come to me and say, what can I buy in this town for $100 million? Because that's my minimum ask. But for us to put together a $10 million fund here that's focused on minority entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs it goes to our ethos, I think, as Oregonians. It really resonates with what we're trying to do. And the story of RFP.io is not just Elevate Capital, but the Ben Venture Conference put money in. Ty had put money in. And then the TAP fund that the Oregon Growth Board had helped fund, put money into it, so that's through Ty. There was a lot of different players that were involved in the success, and I think that that's what we do best, and that's how we're going to pull ourselves out of this, right? This particular situation. You saw the stats in some of the other panels. You know, if only 2% of the venture capital in the U.S. is going to people of color founders, on the one hand, you could say, wow, that's a shame. On the other hand, you could say, that's a phenomenal opportunity. Just from a strictly a business sense, we know that there's going to be good entrepreneurs who are people of color, and so if they're being overlooked, there's a legitimate business reason why you would want to go and invest in them, engage in them, and actually help support them. And what we also know is, like, if you didn't grow up going to a country club where, you know, every third person was a corporate lawyer and an M&A attorney, you don't have the same social network to be able to actually pull from to help you in the entrepreneurial, to help you become an entrepreneur and be successful. And I think a lot of the work broadly that's being done to help all entrepreneurs, and then specifically female entrepreneurs and people of color, is everything else. Capital is one piece of the spectrum, but you need mentors, you need pro bono services, you need sales channels, and you need people who are patient to help you actually listen and commiserate. And all of the entrepreneurial ecosystem has been upping their game over the past 10 years. We've been a participant in it, but I think just about everybody has been participating in some way, shape, or form, and it's all of us leaning in to be able to actually get the ecosystem moving, because frankly, if it doesn't work for anybody, then why should I expect it to work for people of color, right? So that's it.
Thank you. So let me ask, my guess is that in the audience there's some investors who are saying, I'd like to be more inclusive. I have no idea where to start. I don't want to invest in Elevate, or that's closed, or whatever. What advice would each of you give to them?
Well, I'll jump in. I think it's the same thing that companies have to do when they want to be more inclusive in recruiting. You can't keep doing the same things and expect a different result. So you can't keep looking in the same places, and you have to be intentional, and you have to pull networks together and reach out and go beyond the usual, because otherwise you're going to continue to find the usual. At our company, we've had to do that when we are recruiting. We can't just use Indeed and Craigslist, because we get the same resumes every time we do that. And I've really pushed to go out to a wider network. You know, I'm part of a lot of different networks of women in leadership. They always get all of our job openings. You know, we do whatever we can in Oregon from a minority and people of color. Oregon is hard with that, right? It's not a very diverse state when it comes to people of color, and so you have to be even more purposeful. University of Oregon this weekend actually is hosting the first annual Black Alumni Reunion. And so our company is sponsoring that, and part of what we want is for all these Black alumni from the University of Oregon who don't live in Eugene anymore to know that we're there, that we're recruiting, and that we're interested in diversity. It's the same thing investors have to do. You have to be part of conferences like this. You have to reach out to a broader network. You have to do research, and you have to be intentional. And you can't just do the same things, because then you're going to miss out on those really unique entrepreneurs. And you know, it's also, women only get 2%, just the same as people of color. And then if you look at it from a business perspective, I agree with Sayer that it's a huge opportunity that's just lying there waiting. And statistics on the women's side, women-founded, venture-funded companies return 12% better. You know, every VC should want to fund women when they see those statistics, and you know, that's what I think. You know, investors have to do the research, they have to know the statistics, they have to be intentional, and they have to do different things than they've been doing.
Yeah, I think will continue to add to what Sabrina is saying. Even with all the statistics, right, and the return, the 12%, what it actually should tell us is, as an investor, you have to realize the power of familiarity, like how significant that is for you. And particularly when we're talking about investing, where risk and our aversion to risk even grows, we naturally lean on our defaults more than we realize. And so even in a conference like this, where you might be inspired and say, man, I want to go out and I want to find that next amazing person or idea that I want to invest in that does not look like what I typically will give to, your natural impulses and biases are going to fight you like hell. And so I think one of the things I would encourage investors to consider and think is all the things that Sabrina said of the intentionality and getting out of your comfort, but also you have to recognize what you're wrestling against when it comes to investing. And so too often, we invest in maybe navy blue or a dark colored blue because it's comfortable, it fits with everything we wear, it looks good with our skin complexion. And so then we say, hey, you need to change up your style. You need to buy something different. So we end up buying baby blue. And we come and say, man, I look how radically different I look. I got baby blue on. But we don't realize that the familiarity is, no, that's just a different color of what? Of blue. And in the same way in investing, many times what we say is radical is actually not radical enough. And you'll never get to the real opportunities, the amazing innovators and business leaders that are out there that are screaming for you to invest into them because it actually benefits you until you realize what you have to fight against with your own implicit biases and really the scarcity mentality and just the unsurety of, will this be successful? Because it's not the color blue that I'm familiar with.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I guess I'll add a different perspective, which is, you know, at Meyer, we don't invest in companies, so we don't go out and find the RFPs of the world. We actually invest in managers who then invest in companies. So we are a manager of managers, and 10 years ago, our strategy was just start asking the managers questions. I mean, like, stand up at their meetings, annual meetings, and say, why don't you have any women on your board? And just see what they say. And try to put the pressure on that way. It seems silly, right? And then at the Oregon Growth Board level, it's like, well, we don't know how much, we don't know how many female entrepreneurs we're actually helping because nobody's tracking that. Well, let's just ask our managers to track that. So simply getting the feedback is changing it, right? Because they recognize now when we go talk to the Oregon Growth Board, we go talk to Meyer, we have to address these things. And frankly, if you don't have a person of color on your board, or you don't have a female in a GP position at your investment company, it's very unlikely that you're even going to get a call from us, much less investment from us. And that's just because we don't believe that you have actually evaluated. You know, we don't. It seems like there's so many other perspectives you should have in the room, and we know that there's plenty of people out there who are more than capable of doing this type of work, and it's strange and irregular when they aren't in the room, especially at the leadership levels. So that's something that we look for, and we ask about it. So it can be as simple as calling up the person who manages your money and asking them, so, how many female managers are actually represented in my portfolio? Is that something we can change? I would like to interview them. I would like to, when I look for a new manager in emerging markets, I would like to have at least one female present to me and tell me what her strategy would be as opposed to the other people that show up. So it doesn't always have to be about, just doing the one-offs to the investors. There's other ways that you can try to bend the system.
So, great answer. Let's flip it around, and you've been giving good advice to investors who trying to figure out how to be inclusive in their investments. Flip it around. Give some advice to entrepreneurs who are struggling to demonstrate the value of investing in inclusion. What advice can you give those entrepreneurs?
No, I can take it up. Just start with. So I think what Tori was talking about, the default, it applies to entrepreneurs also. It's like, it's not only on the other side where investors have to look for, inclusive opportunities. I think as an entrepreneur, there's always a perception, because now that media is talking about inclusive, all those things, we assume that people are not going to invest on it. So I think that's the perception we have. We have defaulted, okay, Steve is a white person, so he's not going to invest. And if I had thought that way, I would not have approached Steve or Jim or Diane for help. She helped me a lot. I think it is the entrepreneur's perception. We have to come out of that shell. Okay, people are going to invest. People are, as long as, again, just because of a person of a color, people are going to invest. Because you have to have the right idea. You have to have the right mentality. You have to have the right team. You have to have the right approach. So then I think you should go out of your comfort zone to approach. Nothing is going to be easy. You have to wait. You have to knock the door not once, not twice, not 100 times. It could be 1,000 times before something has been open. So I think my biggest takeaway is as an entrepreneur, you got to ask. Otherwise, if you're not asking, nobody's going to look at you and then give you an opportunity. So that's
All right.
And I'll jump in a little bit. In my work at Palo Alto Software and running a tech company, I think piggyback just on that as a woman, I find that you have to not ever think you're going to fail, and you have to want it, and you have to be really well prepared and almost overly prepared. In the same way Ganesh says that everybody thinks he's an engineer, everybody thinks I'm not that technical. So I walk into a room and I know more than everybody else, and it's not just because I'm smarter, it's because I've done my homework, because I've worked hard and I've recognized that, and I'm never going to be in a place where I'm representing something I don't know. If I don't know, I own it, but I also own who I am. I'm a woman. I bring different values. I run my company different, and I think it's returned 100-fold the way I run my company, but I don't run my company like a male CEO, and I don't pretend to. As a CEO, I have 3 kids. All 3 of them came to the office with me from the time they were 2 weeks old, because you can't take maternity leave if you're running a company. It'd be great if you could, but as the CEO and you're running a growing company, I don't have that luxury. So my babies came to the office with me, and we've been able to do that for other women. And there's been 10 babies who've come over the years to the office, and we've created spaces where we don't annoy other employees, and nobody has to deal with crying babies. But I just don't ever, look at something as a hurdle. I just embrace it. I hate that when, as a woman, if I have to do something with my kid, I'm supposed to lie about it, right? In business, I'm not supposed to say, I need to take my kid to a doctor's appointment. I'm supposed to say, oh, I'm busy, I double booked, sorry. And I reject that. I say, I embrace who I am, and the fact that I'm going to do that means I'm going to work later, but it shows my passion and my drive, and I hate the hiding and the apologizing. I think you just need to see what you want and take it.
So I think a lot of things to potentially comment on what's been said here. I think as a white male CEO for 17 years, I think I've come to learn that the best ideas in the organization, the best business opportunities come from all types. We've had employees of every color, every gender, every sexual orientation from every part of the globe. And some of my best leaders have been females. They've been people of color. They've come from all walks of life. We have people with blue hair, with red hair, green hair. I mean, you name it. They're the best performers in an organization, the best business opportunities, the best entrepreneurs come from all walks of life. And I think the message I would suggest we all take away here is that you can't expect to get the best outcomes in the year 2018 if you're blind to your own biases and you're preventing them from or they're preventing you from investing in good companies, whether it's in hiring them, whether it's promoting a candidate because of gender. Like you will not get the best outcomes. And until you break down those biases, you're not going to be as successful as you can be. So I don't know that I'd like to think that in my mind, there is no male way of running a company. But I know that that's not the universal reality. And until you break those things down, we're just not going to do well. So I don't know, I have to admit, it kind of hurt to hear you say, well, there's a male way of running a company. I've never thought of myself as running a company where people felt like they needed to lie about why they weren't in the office, whether you're sick or you have to take your child anywhere. And I think that in itself is yet another bias, right? I mean, people are probably looking at me as one of the white men up here, thinking, okay, this guy is not the person who's going to invest in companies that are run by females or that are run by minorities, and that's absolutely not the case. I mean, the biases work every direction.
But we need people like you to speak up about it, because unfortunately there's too many organizations, whatever their leadership are, that, especially as a woman, that's who I am, so that's how I'm going to speak, that, I know too many women where if they don't win what they call the boss lottery, they can't move up. And, it sounds like women who work for you have won the boss lottery, and we want more of that. And it is unfortunately not the norm, and people like you have to speak up and show and embrace it so that there is leadership that says there is no norm and you can be different, and having you here is part of it.
So we've just got a couple minutes left. Does anybody have a question? Not one. Well, yes.
So you mentioned about speaking up, and this summit, it's all about inclusion, and you guys have been demonstrating it by investing and trying to bring inclusion into the companies you run. So what do you think it's your responsibility, and what would you suggest for everybody here in the summit to actually do?
Anyone?
I'll take a quick pass. Look, the construct of race, and that's at Meyer Trust, that's actually the lens that we use, is a racial lens, to think about our actions and the externalities of the things that we do. That construct's 400 years old. And so we're fighting against, generations, tens of generations, like many generations of intracted ways of thinking. And so I don't presume that in my lifetime, there's going to be meaningful changes made here. But what I can do is I can advocate and I can own my truth. We can find ways to include things in investment policy statements. We can find ways to challenge people's thinking on what it means to lead in a company, what it means to have diverse voices, and I can lean on the things that I can lean on. It requires sort of all of us to be advocates for that, and that means all of us, not just the people of color, or not just the people who are estranged, and not just the people who are like screaming or whatever. It's also the people who've been successful in their lives, giving back and trying to own the community more.
On that note, I think we're going to have to cut it off. Would you please join me in thanking this wonderful panel?